Thank you for the welcome. I'm the head of UX at Noice. Having come all the way from Australia to be here with you today, thank you for the very warm welcome. I do have to admit, I feel a little bit out of place here because it's called Magnolia DevDays, not Magnolia Design Days. But hopefully you will find what I'm sharing here this afternoon at least a little bit interesting, which is Magnolia by Design, building a Figma workflow for Magnolia. So a little bit of background context. Noice is a digital agency based in Melbourne and Sydney. We work in small squads to deliver large projects. We like to punch above our weight, which means we're always acutely aware of how we can be more efficient. Any inefficiencies in processes get multiplied across projects, so we're always looking for ways to optimize our workflows. And one of those ways that we do improve our efficiency is by writing tools to help get the job done. And this Figma-to-Magnolia plugin is the latest one in our arsenal. So, as an agency, we're one founder. Jake up the back there is a dev, and the other one is a designer. We're more than familiar with the problem of design to dev handover. And I imagine this resonates with a lot of people in the room, especially if you're a back-end specialist who's ever been asked to write CSS. Speaking generally, designers and devs have different priorities. Designers care about visual perfection, pixel-perfect layouts, maintaining brand consistency, sometimes we just get called make it pretty. Developers care about technical implementation, performance, maintainable code, a lot of wonderful things that we've seen here today. When we come to design handovers, even a really well-streamlined process can fall down because there's manual translation involved. There's errors and inconsistencies when you make the move from Figma to code. Then you're burning hours going back and forth in design reviews to make sure that things are correct when both the dev and the designer would rather be doing something else. So to illustrate, here's a completely fictional scenario that I just made up. Jake has got 1 million ACs from the client to worry about. He's in BFF land. He's doing whatever black magic it is that devs do. He's worrying about complex business logic. And then here comes a Teams message from me telling him that the padding on the button is wrong. We'd both rather be doing something else, right? But this human factor in getting our design into code can really get in the way. So we asked ourselves, how can we bridge this gap? What if we could bridge this gap? Figma actually has some tooling that is useful for this. We've got dev mode, you've got code gen, there's even code connect if you've got an enterprise license, if you're made of money, but it's not specific enough to our context. So we thought we could improve this by building something that's unique and bespoke to Magnolia design to dev workflow. Thankfully, Figma already has a really robust API that exposes almost everything we need to create this pipeline. While on the surface, it might just look like a design tool where you drag rectangles around, that interface is actually powered by a comprehensive object model. So when you create a button in Figma, you're not just drawing pixels, you're mapping values to object properties. So in this response from the Figma API, we can see that Figma is tracking, I actually don't know how to point this, there we go. You can see that it's tracking bound variables, so we've got this thing here, the variable alias and variable ID. And it's tracking these variables for padding, for our corner radiuses, and our spacing. So it knows that this button's padding references design tokens. So this isn't just static design data, it's structured semantic information that we can work with programmatically. Just about everything that's visually represented on the canvas is included in the object. And apologies again in advance to the back-end devs, I am about to talk more CSS. Layout mode, vertical, which we can, whoops, let's go back one, which we can see up here, vertical. That basically means that it's a flexbox container with a flex direction of column. We can also see precise padding values, we can see RGB color fills, and we can also see a parent-child hierarchy. This is what makes our tool possible. Figma isn't just giving us pixels to reverse engineer, it's giving us a structured representation of interface components that maps remarkably well to HTML, CSS, and component frameworks. Figma understands constraints and responsive behavior. When you pin an element to the right edge and center it vertically, Figma stores that as horizontal max, vertical center. So it's not just remembering pixel positions, it's remembering intent. And with Figma's variable systems, Topher was talking about the design system earlier and how great tokenized design systems are. I am a huge lover of design systems. And this just Figma takes it even further with its new variables. This button's background, for instance, isn't just blue, it's bound to a design token with an ID that we can use to get a variable name, semantic background brand. And when that token changes, every instance updates automatically. So Figma's storing parameterized configurable components with logic built in. So we've established that we have all of this valuable information in the Figma API, but how do we actually get that into Magnolia? Our approach creates a direct pipeline from Figma to Magnolia through Git changes. So how does it work? The designer updates Figma, the plugin processes the changes and pushes to GitHub, and Magnolia picks up the updates through CI/CD or when a dev pulls the updated branch. We could just generate the component code with static values and call it a day, but clients want scalable multi-brand solutions. So it makes sense for us to integrate both code gen and design token generation into our workflow. So let's walk through the process in more detail. First, we extract Figma variables and convert them to CSS variables. And then we take Figma components and generate HTML, CSS, FTL or React templates and YAML dialogs for Magnolia. So to dive into the technical challenges, we'll start with variables. In a fully fledged design system, Figma variables are organised across multiple collections. So we've got 2 here, with multiple modes handling global variables, brands, breakpoints, platforms, even light and dark modes. They can be organised in hierarchies, sometimes deeply nested like we see here. On the edge there, we can see multiple layers of nesting. And most of the variables in these collections will be referencing variables in other collections. So we need to be able to recursively resolve all variable aliases and then namespace them with their collection context. When we export a component, we get variables that reference other variables by ID. Just looking at it, it's not very useful if you're a human, and it's especially not useful if you're trying to access these variables outside of the context of Figma. For instance, you can't really tell here, but all 4 of these border radius values are actually referencing the exact same variable. So our workflow needs to resolve these ID references into meaningful CSS variable names, something like this. So first we have to access the global variables object in Figma and get those variable names. Then we create a global map of variable IDs to variable details. For each variable, we split the name into parse segments, normalise each part to kebab case, and determine the collection context. So our global collections, they don't get any prefix, but brand, breakpoint, even light and dark mode specific collections do. So this creates predictable semantic CSS variable names from Figma's internal structure. When we encounter a variable alias, we look it up in our global map and reconstruct it from the full path. So a cryptic Figma ID becomes brand component hero radius in our CSS. For our multi-brand implementations, we can see here how the same semantic token, which is colour foreground primary, actually has 3 different values depending on the different brand that we're working with. White label uses neutral 900, while .mar uses grey 900. Same meaning, different value. So this creates a sophisticated token system. Each brand collection generates global tokens up here. And so colour scales, typography scales, scaling, spacing systems, and then the semantic and component tokens reference these globals and do all of the heavy lifting. A component can reference brand, component, button, background, primary, default, and then it automatically gets the right colour for whatever brand context it's in. Our approach also handles responsive design, so we define any responsive value inside of a brand collection, up here, and then reference these variables in our breakpoint collection, which has got multiple modes. When we process a breakpoint collection specifically, it creates cascading breakpoint tokens that can be referenced once in a component without media queries. The token system handles the responsive behaviour automatically. So a component can reference breakpoint typography, font size, heading huge, and get the right size for mobile, tablet, or desktop without any additional CSS required. So now that we've looked at our token system, we can move on to component generation. And that's where we hit a few of the fundamental differences between Figma's design-centric way of thinking and CSS's web-centric system. We need to convert Figma's native auto layout to CSS Flexbox, handle absolute positioning with constraints, and process component variants and properties. So this is Figma's auto layout UI. When we switch auto layout on, we're more or less saying, up until recently when they introduced CSS Grid, thanks Figma, we're basically saying display flex. So the way auto layout behaves is roughly the same as what we expect to see in web, but it's still not quite a one-to-one mapping. In order to convert auto layout information from the Figma API, we need to detect the layout mode, convert gaps and spacing, translate alignment properties, and handle sizing behavior. Here we're detecting whether auto layout is enabled, bless you, and set display flex. The horizontal layout becomes CSS flex direction row, and the vertical layout becomes CSS flex direction column. That's the foundation of our auto layout conversion. Item spacing becomes CSS gap. That's pretty straightforward. Padding slightly more complex. If all of the padding values are equal, we can use the shorthand. Otherwise, we generate the full four-value syntax. With alignment mapping, this is kind of where Figma starts to diverge annoyingly from CSS. So we have min becomes flex start, center, stays center, max becomes flex n, and space between stays space between. We do handle primary axis and cross-axis alignment, but we're missing some CSS values like space around and space evenly, which aren't available in Figma. As an example, this response here from the Figma API, it has layout mode vertical, primary axis align items min, counter axis align items stretch, and we've got a gap of 8 pixels and padding values, and this is the Flexbox code that our plugin generates. Absolute positioning, on the other hand, is a little bit more complex. We detect when Figma uses absolute positioning, then process constraints to determine the CSS positioning. This involves horizontal and vertical constraints, stretching behavior, and unfortunately, for me, a designer, a little bit of maths. It is literally simple arithmetic, and I'm not very good at it. So we can see here, min pins to the left. That's pretty simple. Center stays center. We use transforms to get that centered, but then also we have a little, we add some offset if it's not completely perfectly centered. But max requires calculating the distance between the right edge of the child element and the right edge of the parent element. Stretch constraints pin both edges and override the width or height to auto. This allows for responsive behavior where absolutely positioned elements grow and shrink with their parent containers. And unlike in CSS, where we can simply specify bottom 0 or right 10 pixels, in Figma's API, we only get the X and Y coordinate of the top left corner of an element. I don't know why, it's very annoying. Even if the object is pinned to the right or the bottom. So we need to take some measurements from that element and its parent and then do a little bit of maths in order to transform the CSS into absolute positioning. In the case of finding the right value of an absolutely positioned element, we take the width of the parent minus the element's X value plus the element's width. So for a 375 pixel parent, we, with an element at X24 and a width 200, that's 375 minus 224 plus 200 equals 151 pixels from the right edge. So this precision is really crucial for pixel perfect layouts if your designer is being really annoying and won't just, use auto layout. So bringing it back all to Magnolia, why does this work so well? Because light modules are hot reloaded, the designer can simply push their changes to a Git repo inside of Figma, never leaving their context in which they're comfortable, using our plugin. With CI/CD, these new additions are almost instantaneously viewable in any environment. Front-end developers can just git pull and then focus on adding business logic. Additionally, we deliver designer to author continuity by converting component properties into Magnolia dialog fields. So the properties defined by the designer in Figma become the same fields that content authors see in Magnolia. The process generates the render templates by taking our original generated HTML and adding logic for variable assignments, text content replacement, and variant class generation. Here we're processing Figma component properties and generating variable assignments for FTL and React templates. Boolean properties get their default values, text properties get default content, and variant properties get their default selections. Next, our text content replacement function finds static text in the HTML and replaces it with mapping to the Magnolia dialog fields. For variant handling, we create macros that generate variant-specific class names. So it takes the base class from our Figma component set and adds variant-specific classes based on the component's variant properties, if any. So button might become button size large variant primary based on the content author's variant selections. I mentioned previously that we convert Figma component properties into fields. So in Figma, we can create reusable components that we can drop instances of wherever we want in our file. When we update the master component, all those instances get updated as well. It's pretty simple. Designers can actually define authorable properties inside of these component sets. And there are 3 component property types that are relevant to our task: text, booleans, and variants. Text is pretty self-explanatory. Booleans allow the designer to show or hide elements, and variants allow for distinct visual treatments like colour themes or layouts. A simple mapping converts text properties into text fields, Boolean properties into checkbox fields, variant properties into combo box fields, and then we also have some additional handling for images, which turn them into damn-length fields. And then the last piece of the puzzle, our GitHub configuration, is really straightforward. First, you configure your light module repository. Then, when you push your changes in the plugin, a new commit's created, and then developers can then pull the changes and see the results instantly. So to come back to our approach, the final workflow is this. The designer creates the tokens and components in Figma. The plugin generates templates, CSS and YAML files, and pushes to GitHub. And then the developer pulls the changes and the new components are available in Magnolia. The entire cycle from design to deployment can happen in minutes. And I'm actually going to taunt the demo gods and attempt a live demo at the conference, which is a little bit crazy. And it's not going to work now. It worked perfectly. There we go. So I've just got an empty Magnolia page here, and I'm just going to show that I've got nothing up my sleeve. I literally don't have anything up my sleeve because that's not working. I flew too close to the sun. Here we go, hitting those green bars. So nothing up my sleeve. I've got all of these lovely components. I don't have a card component, which is a bit sad. And that's what I really need in here. So what I'm going to do is bring this up over here. So this is my Figma file. And we can see over here that I have got a card component. Now that's pretty cool. That's got a few different variants. If I click on this, we can see over here I've got 4 variants. I've got default, elevated, overlay, minimal. I've got some states, and I've got heading, description, tag, and then the ability to show tag and show the description. And what I'm going to do here is launch my plugin, Figma-to-Magnolia. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to generate some design tokens from Figma variables and push them to the code. So these are the variables that live in my file at the moment. I've already mapped them in my variable table, and I'm just going to push. I really should have added a loading spinner here so we can, here we go. We've successfully pushed that to GitHub. And I'm going to go over to component generation and generate component from this selected node. And here we go. So I've got variants here that I can have a look at, minimal variant, elevated variant. So I'm pretty happy with how that looks. I can always preview, as a designer, I'm not going to look at the code, but I can always preview the code if I really wanted to. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to push to GitHub. And that was successfully pushed, thank God. And now I'm going to pull this. I actually have no idea where this is in relation to the rest of things. So what I'm going to do here is hit git pull. My hand's shaking so much I can't type git pull. And And now I do have a watcher running in the background for full transparency, and I'm going to reload that. And now I've got a card component. Not only do I have a card component, but I've got fields in a dialog. So let's type hi Magnolians. And I'll save changes. Oops. We have to wait for the CSS to load. Let me just load that in a tab. Here. No! It worked this morning too. I don't know why that's not working. Sorry? No, it's not. I don't think it's a 3-column because it's got a fixed width. It literally worked this morning too. That's the worst. Oh. I know. Like I said, I flew too close to the sun. You're going to have to trust me that it worked. No, it actually has a placeholder image. Yeah, that works. It's a really cute picture of my dog too. So, you know, you all wanted to see my cute dog. This was hubris, by the way. I don't know why this hasn't worked. If anyone wants to see it work, hit me up later and I'll get it to load for you. That's so embarrassing. Oh well, yeah, I can show the HTML in Figma. So, well, I can actually show you the FTL. Yeah. So we've got our variable assignments here. We've got our macro to generate variant-specific class names. We've got our Boolean logic to show tags, hide tags, show description, hide description. And I'm just going to go back to Firefox and just open up my inbox. That's really useful. Sorry? I did run the build. Let me try again. Build. There we go. Hey. How's that? Not just a live demo, but live debugging. Now that it's actually working, I can change the variants as well. So let's have a look at Elevator, because this is what I wanted to show you. I spelled Magnolians wrong too, that's how nervous I am. What I did point out to you in Figma was that there was a drop-down menu to select interaction states like default and hover, and what our plugin actually does is turns them into actual CSS interaction states instead of choosing them from a drop-down. And for one last thing, I am going to try and do this live while I'm turned around. I'm going to go and try to change a variable here. Let's go change our card elevated background to something green to go with the theme. Green 100, green 200. I'm going to open up my plugin again. Go away, doc. I'm going to push these tokens. And now I'm going to bring my mouse back here and run git pull and run the build. Now I can find my mouse. It's green. Thank you for your patience. So, I can't switch back to my presentation now. Here we go. Boom. So there's a saying that goes, necessity is the mother of all invention. For us, the need to maximise our efficiency and get taken down a notch as a small team has led to tooling that transforms how we deliver outcomes for clients. So instead of spending weeks building basic components from scratch, we start projects with component libraries generated directly from design specifications, which can then be expanded upon functionality-wise. So more effort is put into that business logic and into that complex functionality and less about an annoying designer quibbling over 4 pixels. Because we approach our UI work with a systematized philosophy, component updates largely happen, as you just saw, just by updating a few values in our Figma variable tables, allowing designers to revise elements with minimal disturbance or rework in code. They simply push those revised tokens. So this isn't just about efficiency, it's about maintaining design integrity through the development process and creating that crucial continuity from designer intent to content author experience. The code is production ready, the tokens are brand specific, and the Magnolia integration is seamless. And that's the kind of smart tooling that lets small teams punch above their weight class. Thank you for your patience.
Very cool, very impressive. Thanks, Rihana.
Thank you.
Do we have some questions from the crew?
No.
Is this open source? Can it please be open source?
Ask my boss.
Thank you.
Jake?
You have explained quite well how the Figma functionalities translate to CSS.
Yep.
Have you had to change the way you design stuff so it turns into better CSS using this tooling, or is it just so customized to your company that it just works?
I haven't had to. I haven't had to change too much about the way that I work. It's pretty flexible. It's pretty forgiving. I've tried it with some very random things. I've made some very ugly designs and it's translated them really well. I think that's kind of a credit to the way that Figma has organised all of its information. It's definitely, I think, made me think more about the intent of how am I grouping content together a little bit more. And I feel like in a way that's probably made me a bit of a better designer, knowing actually what's under the hood and how it's being translated into CSS. So how am I actually constructing semantically these objects? But I mean, if you want to make the ugliest piece of HTML and CSS possible, you absolutely can. And it'll spit it out for you still.
More questions? Oh.
I have another one, if I may.
Yeah.
And what have been the limitations? I know this will work perfectly for buttons and stuff, but grids, menus, how far have you pushed it?
So Figma really helpfully, while I was literally in the middle of building this, they just released CSS grid support for auto layout, and I believe that works in with variables, so you could actually create a really robust grid system with it. I unfortunately have not had the time to play with it, but I think you really could push it really far. The amount of stuff that you can do at the moment, actually, the CSS grid is a huge unlock in auto layout. It will allow you to have some really, really different layouts that are triggered purely by those cascading breakpoint tokens that I talked about before. Yeah, I'm excited to finish my holiday and sit down with it and try and nut that particular part out. But yeah, I have made some pretty wild things. I think I'd like to look more at, there's one more component property type that I didn't talk about, which is called the instant swap, which I think could unlock the ability to reference other components that you've already made in your code and place them in there. And I think that would be a massive unlock. I just haven't explored it that far yet.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And for the reference, I broke every single AI coding rule that you set, Jan, when we did this. I tried, working with a 2,000 lines of code file, did not like that. Yeah, tried fixing 5 things in one go, did not like that. So I think I learned all of your rules the hard way.
Nice. All right. Thank you so much, Rihana.
Thank you.